The Second World War left the globe in shambles, but out of the debris and damage caused by World War II rose two superpower nations, the United States of America and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. These two superpowers divided the European continent in half with their rivaling political ideas in what became known as the Cold War. The United States and Western Europe favored democracy, while the USSR wanted to spread communism across the globe.
Well, I think we were very removed from all of that, but it was definitely talked about. And the feeling, I think in Europe was that we were afraid, very, very afraid of nuclear war.
Each nation was extremely nationalistic and refused to give in to one another, causing a Cold War. A Cold War has no actual violent battles, but is simply a sort of contest to see which nation can outdo the other. And in the Cold War between the US and the USSR, everything became a competition.
We could not get anything made in Russia in this country. No, it would have been out of the question, and it would have been unpatriotic to buy such a thing.
Both countries tried to expand their militaries as much as possible and outdo each other with advanced weaponry in an event called the arms race. There was even major competition in the sports world with the 1980 Olympics hockey tournament between the US and the USSR. However, arguably, the biggest competition between the two nations was the space race, a race to see who could explore the final frontier the furthest. On October 4th, 1957, the USSR launched Sputnik 1, their first space probe. This officially started the space race and surprised the United States. On November 3rd, the USSR launched Sputnik 2 into space, this time with a Husky mix called Laika aboard. Now the United States was really upset, as they seemed inferior to Russian technology. They attempted to counter the Soviet advances by launching Vanguard TV-3 on December 6th of the same year. Tragically, the rocket exploded at launch and failed to threaten the USSR, but America stayed determined. On January 31st, 1956, the Explorer 1 was sent successfully into orbit, giving the USSR substantial competition. The space race was on. On October 1st, 1958, NASA was founded, giving the USA a great space program. However, the USSR was still a threat. On September 12, 1959, Luna 2 was crashed into the moon's surface. Many historians believe this was intentional, as a jab at the US. If anything, this seemed to inspire America. On May 25, 1961, President John F. Kennedy famously announced that Americans will walk on the moon and return safely by the end of the decade.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
So John Kennedy declared that we would have a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And it probably was in his honor that we pursued that.
Over the next 8 years, the U.S. space program had its ups and downs. The president's speech filled America with determination, but tragedy came on November 22, 1963, when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated. However, this made America more determined to accomplish its goal. In 1966, the Surveyor 1 had the first successful soft landing on the moon. However, tragedy struck again when 3 men died in a fire during the Apollo 1 launch test in 1967. Staying persistent, there was no shortage in volunteers as more and more people began astronaut training. In 1968, the Apollo 7 was put into space to test equipment for the moon landing. This was also the first televised event in space. Preparations for the moon landing were well underway. NASA just needed a few more tests and a crew. The crew for the chosen ship, the Apollo 11, consisted of 3 men: Michael Collins as the command module pilot, Edwin E. Aldrin Jr. as the lunar module pilot, and Neil Armstrong as the commander. Armstrong was born on August 5, 1930, in Wapakoneta, Ohio. He showed interest in flight from a young age, achieving his pilot's license at 16. He joined the Navy, and in 1949 he was called to serve in the Korean War. Inspired by Kennedy's speech, Armstrong joined the NASA astronaut program in 1962. The lunar landing was only his second mission. The rocket entered lunar orbit on July 19th, and on July 20th at 1:46 p.m., the lunar module, the Eagle, separated from the command module. 2 hours later, the Eagle began its descent.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, Diane, please, for me. Tony, this is so great you can't believe it. I believe it, Charlie. Hippity hoppity, hippity hopping over hill and dale.
Aldrin and Armstrong spent 2 hours walking, taking pictures, and collecting 47 pounds of moon rocks. They also spoke to President Nixon at Mission Control in Houston. The U.S. flag was proudly planted on the moon's surface, along with a plaque that read, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 A.D. We came in peace for all mankind."
At the time of the first moon landing, I was 15 years old. I was attending the 7th National Boy Scout Jamboree in Idaho, northern Idaho. And it was in a state park, Farragut State Park, and there was a very large outdoor amphitheater. And it had been equipped with some very large screens, like a triplex type arrangement. And the moon landing was broadcast on these large screens, and there were, I don't remember now, I was in excess of 10,000 of us there who got to watch this live. We were happy to see it happen. We weren't really shocked because this was Apollo 11, and there had been a couple other Apollo missions where actually the moon had been orbited, but there was no landing. But this was like the culmination of a long project.
I was 11 years old. It was obviously July 20th. It was a hot summer, and we had a new colored TV, which was a big deal in our house, but it was in black and white, as I recall, and it was rather late at night for an 11-year-old to be up to watch it. I think we were all excited. It was kind of like watching a Super Bowl or a World Series game, something of that level, especially if it had your team in it. It was, yeah, everybody. I think everybody who had a TV was watching it. I would use the phrase, the United States won the moon. They won the race to get to the moon, which seemed to be the big competition.
That night, Aldrin and Armstrong spent the night on the moon.
Houston. Fly away, Houston. Vector good. We're burning flight. Roger. Looks good, flight. Nice shot, flight. Roger. Heading, stand by for flight down.
With the 3 men successfully splashing down, Kennedy's promise had been fulfilled. The successful moon landing had tremendous effects for everyone. People across the globe saw it and were filled with wonder. U.S. citizens everywhere were happy they had won the race to the moon.
I think we were very optimistic about things to come, and just in awe of America and in awe of everybody that was making these great strides outside of planet Earth.
Overall, the moon landing created a rush of nationalism for the United States and Western Europe, and deterred the Soviet Union. Active lunar exploration by the United States came to an end on December 19, 1972, with the splashdown of the Apollo 17. The moon program was fueled mainly by political interest. Exploration of space was a direct cause of the Cold War between the U.S. and the USSR. If the Cold War hadn't happened, it is possible humans still wouldn't have been on the moon by now.
Difficult question if there had been no Cold War, whether or not the moon project would have taken place. There would have been additional resources to develop the program, but I guess the economic reason would have been, okay, why? Is there something there we think we want? I'm not sure that it would have happened had there not been a Cold War.
Space exploration not only gave pride to the United States, but it inspired other nations around the world to explore the great unknown, such as France, Japan, China, the UK, India, Israel, and most recently in 2013, Iran. The first moon landing inspired Americans in a time of need and continues to inspire people across the globe today.